Today we are praying about Ukraine. I know we've been praying about Ukraine all year long, but I think as time has gone on, as we've watched this war, we've gotten used to it, and there's a lot of people that I think stopped praying. There are times where I kind of realize, man, I haven't prayed about Ukraine in a while, because you just get used to it. It just becomes another headline. But today I want to renew this call to pray for Ukraine. The Bible tells us in John 16:33, Jesus says, I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you'll have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. I really like the scripture because it really shows us the truth about what we live in. Jesus says plainly that the world that we live in will always bring tribulation. It will always bring trouble and problems because that's its nature. It's brokenness, it's sin, it's death. And so it can't help but create fruits out of that. And that's why we always have problems, and we're going to have problems. But he also says in this scripture that in me you may have peace, that he is the source of peace. He's the source of the complete opposite. And so what's the natural thing when you want peace in a land? You run to God. He's the source of peace. And so you say, God, please bring peace. And so that's the first thing that I want to challenge you to pray about today is peace, to return to that land. Here's the second thing, and I want to read a scripture that I think is really important to understand before we talk about this. In Psalm 147:3, it says, He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. The Bible makes it clear here that it is specifically God that heals the brokenhearted, and He's the one who binds open wounds, wounds that are already there. He's the one who can do that. Why I think the scripture is so important when we talk about praying for Ukraine is because praying for peace is not enough. That's just one prayer. I've been to Ukraine. I've seen all the humanitarian issues during the war. I've been near the front lines, and all the horror that you can see, all the buildings that are destroyed, all the livelihoods that are lost. Some places that we went to, there were bodies that were still in the rubble, and you see that horror, and so yes, you go, God, please bring peace. But the thing that I walked away with more than anything, and the thing that I think about more than anything when I think about Ukraine, is the things that you can't see. In our country, here in the U.S., we are blessed with a huge infrastructure and a lot of resources that are put in to help soldiers come back from war, right? We have the VA system, and whatever you want to say about it, there's a lot of money and resources and attention given to the mental health aspect of war. And so what ends up happening is when people come back from war, there are counselors, there are programs to help them deal with the PTSD, to help them deal with all the things that they experience so that they can be healed and kind of brought to normalcy, right? When you go to Ukraine, that infrastructure doesn't exist. Here with the infrastructure, our suicide rates among soldiers that were in active combat, they're huge. They're scary, to be honest, even with all the resources. In Ukraine, you don't have these resources, you don't have this infrastructure, and it's not just soldiers that are coming back from a war overseas, it's people that are living on the front lines of this war. And so when we talk about the damage that you can't see, we're talking about human hearts and human minds that are broken, not just of soldiers, but of regular people. And just like the world that is broken produces broken tribulation, right? Broken fruit. That's what's going to happen here. People have to go back to their families. They have to live their life. And even if peace would come to Ukraine today, people still have to live with the brokenness. And what they do with brokenness, they beget more brokenness. They raise children in a certain way out of their pain. And so what I want to challenge us today to do is not just to pray for peace, but pray for God to heal the brokenhearted. He's the only one who could do that supernaturally, because even the infrastructure can't handle it here. Only God can do something miraculous. And so I'm asking you today to pray for peace and pray that God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Another couple practical things to pray about. Pray for the church in Ukraine, because those are the hands and feet that will bring peace. Those are the hands and feet that will help heal the brokenhearted. And so pray that God resources, blesses, and mobilizes the Ukrainian church, not just during war for humanitarian aid, but post-war for the healing aspect of it. And lastly, pray for the orphans and widows. Jesus and God the Father in the Old Testament paid a lot of attention to the widows. If you see that, it's all over the Old Testament. There's a lot of barbarity, but you also see a lot of things where God just reminds His children to care for the orphans and widows. I just challenge you, pray for the orphans and widows of Ukraine. God bless you as you do that.